tomorrow at 2:00 p.m., the U.S. government is going to launch a weapon that, won't make a sound, it won't break a single window, and it won't deploy a single soldier.
Right.
Yet it is explicitly designed to just, collapse an entire nation's government.
Yeah, the weapon isn't a missile. It's a spreadsheet.
Exactly.
We're looking at a battlefield where the front lines are literally bank compliance departments.
Right.
And the casualties are global supply chains. Because a modern financial offensive can cripple a nation's infrastructure just by, severing its access to the global ledger.
So today is Sunday, August 23rd, 2026. And tomorrow, the United States Treasury is launching what it officially calls Economic D-Day against Iran.
Yeah, that's the official branding.
Right. And we've pulled together a really massive stack of sources to figure out how this actually works, because it's complex.
Right.
We have financial reports from Investing Live and EBC Financial. We've got geopolitical analysis from Open Magazine, the Jerusalem Post, and actual official documentation from the U.S. Treasury itself.
The primary source material, yeah.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the actual mechanics of this. We're going to explore the hidden machinery of economic warfare, this wild cat and mouse game of global oil smuggling.
Which is fascinating, by the way.
Well, it really is. And, how a geopolitical standoff in the Middle East is engineered to directly impact your wallet at the gas pump.
Yeah, if you want to really grasp global economics today,
Yeah.
you have to look at this specific case study.
Mm-hmm.
It perfectly illustrates the sheer just gravitational pull of the U.S. dollar.
Right. But before we go any further, I do need to make a mandatory note here.
Sure.
Our sources today contain some highly politically charged content. There's rhetoric from both the U.S. Trump administration and the Iranian regime.
Right. It's heated material.
Very heated. So we are not endorsing any viewpoints, policies, or rhetoric from either side here. Our goal today is simply to impartially convey the facts, the strategies, and the ideas contained in the original source material.
Just to help people understand this really complex global event.
Exactly. So setting all the politics aside, let's look at the mechanics of tomorrow's announcement.
Okay, let's do it.
So Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is stepping up to a podium tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. Eastern, and he is framing this as the single greatest financial offensive ever marshaled against an adversary.
Right, and President Trump actually laid out the core objective on Truth Social.
Oh, right.
He stated the goal is to quite literally, quote, collapse the Iranian regime.
Wow.
Yeah, by cutting every single economic lifeline.
So our sources highlight this strategic shift taking place.
Yeah.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance refers to the situation as a, quote, delicate dance.
That delicate dance, yeah.
Right, because the U.S. military has already significantly degraded Iran's physical capabilities, right? Like the kinetic stuff.
Exactly. Washington is basically moving from a kinetic restart, which means, physical military strikes, to a complete financial quarantine. The idea is they believe the physical facilities are degraded or destroyed, and now they're specifically targeting the bank accounts that would actually fund the reconstruction of those facilities.
Okay, but I am struggling to see the novelty here, I guess.
How so?
Well, Iran has been under various forms of maximum pressure and intense sanctions for decades.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, so tomorrow is branded as Economic D-Day, but how does this spreadsheet weapon actually look any different today than it did, say, 5 or 10 years ago?
Okay, so the shift is entirely about the target.
The target.
Yeah, so historically, a sanction targeted Iran directly, right?
Okay.
The Treasury would draw this sort of imaginary box around Iranian businesses, Iranian leaders, their exports.
Making it illegal for U.S. companies to deal with them.
Exactly. Illegal for U.S. entities to interact with anyone inside that box.
Right.
But Economic D-Day takes that same box and drops it over anyone, anywhere in the world who does business with Tehran.
Wait, really? Anyone in the world?
Anyone. The U.S. Treasury is basically forcing allies and adversaries into a binary choice.
Okay.
You can do business with the United States, or you could do business with Iran. You absolutely cannot do both.
Wow. So it's an ultimatum to the rest of the planet?
It is an ultimatum, yeah.
But to enforce a binary choice globally, you need a mechanism that can actually reach across borders, right? And actually hurt those who don't comply.
You do. And that brings us to a really specific tool of the U.S. government, which is the Office of Foreign Assets Control.
OFAC.
Right, OFAC. And based on the Treasury primer in our sources, their playbook goes back way, way further than the modern era.
Yeah, I thought this was just a post 9/11 thing, but it's not.
No, not at all. People usually associate these financial sanctions with the post-9/11 world, like you said, but OFAC's underlying philosophy actually dates back to the War of 1812.
That is wild, the War of 1812.
Yeah, Secretary of the Treasury Albert Gallatin administered sanctions against Great Britain, specifically for harassing American sailors.
Okay, and then the agency evolved pretty heavily during World War II, right? With the Office of Foreign Funds Control.
Yes. Their job back then was to freeze assets so that Nazi Germany couldn't seize the foreign exchange and the securities of the countries they were invading.
So they were locking down the money before the Nazis could grab it.
Exactly. It was a defensive financial weapon.
Right.
But today, OFAC administers dozens of sanctions programs using some incredibly sophisticated legal tools.
Right.
And the cornerstone of all of this is the SDN list.
The Specially Designated Nationals and Blocked Persons list.
That's the one.
So being on that list means your U.S. assets are totally frozen, right? And U.S. persons are prohibited from dealing with you.
Correct. But the way OFAC enforces this goes far beyond just, searching for the names printed on a PDF.
Right. The sources detail this one mechanism, the 50% rule.
Oh, the 50% rule is huge.
Yeah, so if a sanctioned individual or entity owns 50% or more of a business, that entire business is automatically blocked, right? Even if the business itself isn't named on the SDN list.
Yeah, and to really understand how powerful that is, just imagine being a compliance officer at, say, a European bank.
Okay.
You can't just check the name of the company trying to open an account.
Yeah.
You literally have to conduct forensic accounting.
Because of the ownership structure.
Right, because you might have a prospective client based in London, right?
Okay.
But then you trace their ownership structure to a holding company in Cyprus.
Right.
Which is partially owned by a shell company in Panama.
Oh, boy.
Which traces back to 2 individuals in Dubai. And if sanctioned person A owns 25% of that structure, and sanctioned person B owns 25%.
Then their aggregate ownership hits 50%.
Exactly. And boom, that London company is now financially radioactive.
The math aggregates, it's almost like a contagion, honestly.
It really is.
If a sanctioned entity touches just half of a business's DNA, the whole organism basically becomes toxic to the U.S. financial system.
Toxic is a good word for it. And if a bank handles that radioactive material, the penalties are incredibly severe.
Because of this legal standard OFAC uses called strict liability.
Right, strict liability.
Wait, I need to pause here because this concept seems wild to me.
Yeah, it's intense.
Strict liability means an organization can be hit with massive civil penalties for violating sanctions, even if they genuinely had absolutely no idea they were doing it.
That's exactly what it means. Ignorance is entirely removed as a legal defense.
Wow.
Yeah, so a shipping firm cannot argue they didn't realize the oil they transported originated in Iran.
Okay.
A bank cannot claim they didn't know a sanctioned oligarch secretly owned the shell company they processed a wire for. Under strict liability, if the transaction occurred,
The institution is liable.
they are liable.
The bureaucracy required to manage that kind of risk is just, it's staggering.
Oh, the compliance costs are astronomical.
Right, because if a bank rejects a transaction because they merely suspect a sanctions hit, they have to report it to OFAC within 10 business days.
Right.
And they are legally required to keep the records of that single rejected transaction for 10 full years.
10 years, yeah. And that administrative burden, that's actually the point. It creates this massive, massive dragnet.
Right.
But the true engine of economic D-Day is the concept of secondary sanctions.
Okay, secondary sanctions. Walk us through that.
So primary sanctions restrict U.S. citizens, right? You're an American company, you can't do business with Iran.
Right, that makes sense.
Secondary sanctions explicitly target non-U.S. persons. So Washington can approach a bank in Europe or a shipping company in Asia and issue a direct threat.
Which is?
Basically, if you facilitate a transaction for Iran, we will cut off your correspondent accounts in the United States.
Let's break down why losing a correspondent account in New York is such a lethal threat for a foreign bank.
It's a death sentence for a global bank.
Because it essentially disconnects them from the U.S. dollar. And since the vast majority of global trade is invoiced in dollars, losing the ability to clear dollar transactions means a bank can, well, they can barely function on the international stage.
Exactly. And we are seeing this weaponized successfully.
Right.
Our sources point to the United Arab Emirates as a very recent victory for this exact strategy.
Right. Abu Dhabi recently halted trade and financial transactions with Iran.
Which is huge because the UAE was supplying roughly 30% of Iran's imports.
So a $21 billion gateway just slams shut.
Just slam shut.
Because the political and financial cost of keeping that trade route open just got too high for the UAE to justify.
Yeah, Dubai has served as this crucial re-export and financial hub for Iranian commerce for literally decades.
Right.
And forcing that door closed, it starves the Iranian economy of vital goods and foreign currency.
So secondary sanctions worked basically flawlessly in the UAE.
They did.
But applying that same UAE playbook to Iran's largest buyer is where the entire U.S. strategy hits a massive brick wall.
Yeah, this is the big complication.
Because according to the Treasury alerts and our financial reporting, China buys roughly 90% of Iran's total oil exports.
90%.
Yeah.
That is the single largest economic lifeline keeping Tehran functioning right now.
Wow.
So if Washington wants economic D-Day to be an actual strategy, and not just a PR branding exercise, they absolutely have to address the Chinese demand.
So OFAC recently issued a specific alert targeting Chinese independent refineries. They're known in the industry as teapot refineries.
Right, teapot refineries.
And these are mostly located in China's Shandong province. And since March of 2025, OFAC has designated multiple teapot refineries because they've collectively purchased, billions of dollars of Iranian oil.
Billions, yeah.
But to actually supply these refineries, Iran has engineered this insane shadow supply chain.
It's wild. They've developed this parallel global shipping infrastructure that is designed entirely around evasion.
Right.
It relies on a quote-unquote shadow fleet of tankers that operate completely outside conventional maritime law.
The mechanisms they use to hide this oil are just fascinating. The sources detail the use of zombie vessels.
The zombie vessels, yeah.
Like a shipping network will literally take the digital identity, the automatic identification system or AIS transponder signal of a ship that has actually been scrapped and dismantled.
It's sitting in a junkyard somewhere.
Right. And they broadcast that dead ship's signal from an illicit tanker to spoof their location data and hide where they are actually going.
It's like a digital ghost ship. And they pair that digital spoofing with physical obfuscation through ship-to-ship transfers.
Oh, right. So a tanker leaves Iran, navigates out to international waters, and then just meets another tanker.
Yeah, they meet up and they often turn off their transponders completely. They call it going dark.
Going dark.
And they pump millions of barrels of crude oil from one ship to the other, literally in the middle of the ocean.
You can basically think of it as money laundering, but for physical liquid.
Liquid laundering, exactly.
They're mixing clean and dirty assets until a compliance officer just can't test the origin. Like, they blend the Iranian oil with oil from third countries to disguise its chemical signature, and then they forge the customs paperwork to relabel the entire cargo as something completely different.
Yeah, the sources say they frequently label it as Malaysian blend.
Malaysian blend, right.
And policing a shadow fleet that's conducting liquid laundering on the open ocean is immensely difficult for the U.S.
I can imagine.
So the U.S. attempts to target the middlemen. The front companies in Hong Kong, the port terminal operators in Shandong, the cargo inspectors who are signing off on this fake paperwork.
Wait, okay, I'm stuck on this, though.
What's that?
You just told me the U.S. has the power to slam shut a $21 billion trade route in the UAE using secondary sanctions.
Right.
So why can't they just point that exact same financial weapon at these teapot refineries in China and force them to stop buying?
Okay. So the leverage of a secondary sanction relies entirely on the target's need for the U.S. financial system.
Right, the correspondent accounts.
Exactly. A global bank in Dubai panics at the threat of losing its New York correspondent account because it needs U.S. dollars to survive.
Okay.
But these teapot refineries in Shandong, they are small, independent operations focused purely on the domestic Chinese market.
Oh, I see.
They have virtually zero exposure to the U.S. financial system. They operate in Chinese renminbi.
So the binary choice of, U.S. or Iran, it just has no teeth if the refinery is never going to choose the U.S. anyway.
Exactly. That makes them incredibly hard for the U.S. Treasury to squeeze directly. If they don't use dollars, that spreadsheet weapon totally misses its target.
So the U.S. is trying to choke off Iran's oil revenue by scaring away all these global buyers and insurers, but they're fundamentally struggling with the biggest buyer of all.
Right, China.
And meanwhile, Iran holds this massive geographic trump card, and they're threatening to use it in a way that just bends this entire economic war right back toward the United States.
Yep. The Strait of Hormuz.
The Strait of Hormuz. This is the Hormuz boomerang mentioned in our sources.
The boomerang effect.
Right. The U.S. throws the sanctions weapon to isolate Iran. But Iran uses a geographic choke point to alter the trajectory of that weapon, ensuring that the economic pain actually hits the global energy market.
And ultimately, that hits U.S. consumers.
Exactly.
Iran is essentially stating that if they cannot export their oil, they will ensure no other nation in the region can export theirs either.
Which is a bold threat. Mohsen Rezai, an official with Iran's Supreme National Security Council, he made this really explicit.
Right.
He warned that if surrounding countries cooperate with the U.S. economic war, quote, not a single drop of oil will leave the Persian Gulf or the Strait of Hormuz.
Not a single drop.
And he threatened to treat another country's participation in U.S. sanctions as a literal act of war.
And to operationalize those threats, the Iranian parliament has actually been drafting a law to charge literal toll fees to ships crossing the Strait of Hormuz.
Toll fees, like on a highway.
Yeah, exactly like a toll road. They're demanding payment for navigation, environmental assistance, security, and insurance.
But they're demanding those fees be paid in Iranian rial, right, or currencies of their choosing.
Yes, on their terms.
It is basically a mirror image of the OFAC strategy.
How so?
Well, the U.S. uses strict liability and the dollar to build a financial barrier, right?
Right.
And Iran uses maritime tolls and physical choke points to build theirs. And if a ship violates their protocols, Iran's maritime authorities are threatening fines, confiscation, blacklisting.
Yeah, and the chilling effect of this geographic leverage is already showing up in the data. The numbers are staggering.
I mean, we're talking about the Energy Information Administration numbers, right?
Yeah. Before this disruption, roughly 20 million barrels of oil pass through the Strait of Hormuz every single day.
Every day.
That represents about 1/5 of the total global petroleum consumption.
But the sources show that traffic has already plummeted. It dropped from 21.6 million barrels per day in the fourth quarter of 2025 down to just 4.9 million barrels a day in the second quarter of 2026.
That's a massive drop. Because a physical blockade isn't even necessary to disrupt the market.
Right, it's just the threat.
Exactly. The mere threat of a tanker being detained by Iranian authorities just raises the risk premium for the entire shipping industry.
So insurance rates spike?
Insurance spikes, freight costs multiply, everything gets more expensive.
And that uncertainty, it doesn't just stay on the ocean. That risk premium trickles down through the entire supply chain and gets priced into the cost of living basically immediately.
Right away, yeah.
J.D. Vance actually acknowledged this dynamic during an interview. He admitted that while Washington applies economic pressure to Iran, Iran applies it back, and it directly impacts American consumers at the gas pump.
Yeah, it's a two-way street.
The Iranian parliament speaker even mocked this on social media. He described it as an American economic weapon just swinging back to hit the person who threw it.
So we're essentially watching a clash of two massive competing wagers here.
Okay, let's break those down. So Washington is betting that Iran's economy will collapse under the weight of this spreadsheet warfare long before the U.S. feels the heat.
Right, because Iran is already dealing with, 68.9% inflation?
Yeah, almost 70% inflation and a shrinking GDP. So the U.S. wager is that Tehran breaks first.
But Tehran's wager is that Western consumers, Asian factories, and the global financial markets will just not tolerate the inflation and the supply chain shocks of a restricted Persian Gulf.
Exactly. They are betting the political pain of high gas prices in the United States will force Washington to back down.
So both sides are actively trying to export their own economic pain to the other's population.
That's exactly what's happening. Which means tomorrow's announcement by Secretary Bessent, it isn't merely a press briefing, it is a live stress test of the entire global financial system.
Right, because the true measure of Monday's economic D-Day, it won't be found in the rhetoric of a press release or, how many new names the Treasury Department adds to the SDN list.
No, not at all.
The real metric of success or failure will be measured on the water and in the markets.
Will the zombie vessels actually stop sailing?
Right. Will the teapot refineries in Shandong actually stop buying this liquid-laundered crude?
And crucially, will the Strait of Hormuz remain choked off?
Exactly. The outcome of this delicate dance playing out between Washington, Tehran, and Beijing, it's going to directly dictate inflation rates around the world, the cost of manufactured goods, and honestly, the price you pay to commute to work.
Yep.
We started out by talking about invisible weapons, and it turns out those invisible weapons do highly visible damage to a household budget.
It is the weaponization of the dollar pushed to its absolute maximum potential.
Which leaves us with one final kind of lingering thought.
Okay.
If the United States increasingly uses the immense power of the U.S. dollar to just force foreign banks and sovereign nations into a corner where they have to choose sides,
Right.
could this economic D-Day actually backfire over the next decade?
Oh, that's a good question.
Right.
Like, could aggressively weaponizing the dollar inadvertently accelerate the rest of the world's motivation to build an entirely new, non-dollar global financial system, just to escape that leverage altogether? Something to think about.